Welcome everybody. This is Tap Out Talk. I'm your host, Bryan, the Hype Ballard. And what are we going to do tonight? We're going to get into a little bit of history with the WWE, the King of the Ring, 1993, here on a retro review with the results and thoughts. So, this happened on June 13th. 1993, as mentioned, in Dayton, Ohio, in the Nutter Center, as the WWE and Vince McMahon like to say, the heartland of America. The event had actually a small attendance of 6,500 fans, but that didn't stop the action from happening and from this classic event to be made. On commentary, we had the ever-popular Jim Ross making his second major pay-per-view debut rookie year in the WWF. Then we have Macho Man Randy Savage and Bobby the Brain Heenan. And I will say that these three proved how a three-man commentary team can get it done and get it done right. And actually, they did really well this night despite having most difficulties throughout the night that you wouldn't even realize. We're going to talk about that and more in the show tonight. So without further ado, let's get in. So I want to start off and I want to talk about the King of the Ring tournament in general. King of the Ring 1993 was technically the 7th edition of the King of the Ring tournament. So, before we get started on this 7th tournament that was in 1993, this was the first televised tournament of the King of the Ring that you was able to actually watch on pay-per-view. So, I want to talk about the first 6 winners. That way you guys have a full perspective of its enriched history and how deep-rooted it was in the WWF. So, our first winner of the first ever tournament was the magnificent Don Morocco, who was now King Don. And he became the first ever King of the Ring many years ago in 1985 on July 8th, defeating the Iron Sheik. The second King of the Ring tournament winner, you guys may remember King Harley Race when he came to the WWF. King Harley Race defeated Pedro Morales in 1986 and kept the King moniker going for many, many years until maybe one of the most famous kings, the Macho King Randy Savage, defeated King Kong Bundy in 1987 to become the third ever man to win King of the Ring tournament. But then, we're going to continue on with everybody has a price for the King of the Ring tournament. The $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase, defeated Randy Savage to win the King of the Ring tournament in 1988. And maybe that's how he got all that money. Maybe he paid for the tournament. Maybe he, being king, has its price. So then ultimately, we get into our next King of the Ring winner in 1989, the breakup of the Tag Team Strike Force as Riba Tito Santana defeats Rick the Model Martel in order to become the 5th King of the Ring. And finally, the 6th King of the Ring winner was none other than Bret the Hitman Hart. He defeated IRS Erwin Shyster in 1991 to become King Bret the Hitman Hart, who actually is going to be in this first televised tournament in 1993. And we're going to see how he is going to do. So, we're told that the first round matches of this tournament will have a 15-minute time limit. The semifinal matches will have a 30-minute time limit, and the finals will get 1 hour. That's right, in order to be King of the Ring in this tournament, you have to beat one man, then another, and then another, all in a single night, to be the illustrious 7th annual King of the Ring. So, in this tournament, we have Bret the Hitman Hart versus Uzi Machismo Reza Ramon. We also have Mr. Perfect versus the Mr. Powerful Hughes in a very big man versus technical brawler. We also have Hacksaw, Mr. America Jim Duggan versus the Beast from the East, Bam Bam Bigelow. And then in the other matchup in the tournament, the Native American Tatanka versus the narcissist Lex Luger, making his rookie debut in the WWE. without further ado, let's get into our first matchup. And that first matchup was a showcase of a showdown with Bret the Hitman Hart against his longtime rival, Oozing Machismo himself, Razor Ramon. Razor Ramon, as he enters the ring, is taunted by the crowd with the chants of 1, 2, 3. And back then in '93, this was fresh off of Razor losing to a random jobber kid named the 1, 2, 3 Kid, who actually was Sean Waltman. You guys might know him better as X-Pac or Six later on in his career. It was Razor Ramon that made his career for him and helped this kid get elevated. Bret, basically this match starts off and Bret's shoulder blocks have zero effect because Razor has a big size advantage. Bret wisely goes to an arm drag and takes over every chance that he gets. Razor body slams Bret, who never releases the arm, and rolls back into the armbar. Bret is great and really just a great technical wrestler, and he kind of gets, he's been in the business a long time. A good old-fashioned thumb to the eye is effective, though, against those technical wrestlers, but Bret just goes right back into a hammerlock. Razor sends Bret into the post, shoulder first, and now in control, Razor is getting very arrogant and cocky, and he's slapping Bret a few times. There's then a fall-away slam, and Razor goes for the pin, and it's a 1 and a 2. He goes for a British Bulldog with a running power slam style move, and he gets another near fall. Bret gets out of the way. There's a few elbows. They start firing away on the Razor Ramon, and as the crowd is going wild, he uses the side Russian leg sweep, just like the Hitman can do. He's the excellence of execution, which was the only basically good for one of those wrestling historical kind of moves. He busts out a very good backbreaker and a second rope elbow for another 1 and a 2. But it makes me honestly realize that Bret's offense is maybe not much for the bad guy. We see Bret take a lot of hits, sternum first into the corner, and Razor tries the Razor's edge, and Bret is up, and Bret is kicking his legs, and he slips free, and he tries a backslide, but he can't overpower his opponent, so he walks up to the corner, and he flips over backwards, and he gets a 2 count for such a close moment in the heartland of America. With a small package then, I thought it was going to be over at this point in time, but Razor sets him up for a second rope back suplex, but Bret counters and then lands on top of him for the 1, the 2, and the 3. Bret Hart advances in the tournament with a win at the 10-minute and 25-second mark. I want to tell you guys, this matchup, I felt was like a very good matchup. And actually, I'm going to say tonight, Bret Hart was showcased really well in this tournament. And fun fact, let's see if we can find a sharpshooter done by Bret in the '93 King of the Ring tournament. So as we move on, let's see if that actually happens. He did not use it in this opening match. So let's move on to our next opening round match, and that's keeping up with the King of the Ring action. That is Mr. Perfect versus the very powerful Curtis Hughes, or Mr. Hughes, the big bodyguard. So we actually get Mr. Hughes, and he just gets kind of a jobber's entrance. He doesn't really get any kind of music or anything, and so he's already in the ring by the time we get back from a backstage quick touch base. And wow, Mr. Perfect gets way over with the crowd. Randy Savage picks Mr. Perfect to win the entire tournament. It's very interesting. Early on, Hughes shows off his power advantage by tossing Mr. Perfect into the corner. Perfect nails a dropkick but falls victim to Hughes and his big strength again. And it was during this match, we actually get Bret Hart appears in the corner in picture-in-picture style, and they are interviewing him about his win, and they're asking him who he'd rather face, Mr. Perfect or Curtis Hughes. And Bret answers and says, well, with Mr. Hughes, you have a very big power match. And he says, but with Mr. Perfect, it's all about endurance. And he goes, I like my technical wrestling over endurance than power. I'll take Mr. Perfect. So, at this point, Perfect nails a drop kick, but falls victim to Hughes' strength once again. He tries to rally, but he runs into a big boot while Perfect continues to bump all over the place, just like he can. We get to, again, Brett talking a little bit, and then Mr. Perfect gets his big babyface comeback on Mr. Hughes, and he strikes him. And Mr. Hughes has the Undertaker's urn in this storyline, as he's stolen it, and that was part of the storyline from WrestleMania. Mr. Hughes actually stole this urn. This was a kind of weird time in the Taker's timeline, and basically when he strikes, Mr. Hughes strikes Mr. Perfect with the urn of the Undertaker that he's been carrying around. He actually is disqualified, which makes Mr. Perfect advance in the tournament at the 6-minute and 2-second mark. Mr. Hughes was actually managed in the WWE again, and he was managed by none other than Harvey Whippleman. And believe it or not, we probably will see him later in this evening. So I want to talk about that in the final thoughts. So, in this, I do wonder, I realized in this matchup, Mr. Perfect is just good, right? He can wrestle anything. Mr. Hughes was severely underrated in his big man ability. When you watch this match and you kind of see things of him, he can go, and he was, definitely trained in the very old school wrestling style of the big man and the art that it is. I remember being a kid, and I've actually went to an indie show where Mr. Hughes was at a very young age, and he was on the show with the Bushwhackers and Doink the Clown in Ohio. And Mr. Hughes, I don't know, left a good impression on me, and I was just like, man, this guy really is bigger. Keep in mind, I was a young kid. So, we go to a backstage segment where we get a little history of Mean Gene Okerlund interviewing Yokozuna and Mr. Fuji. And in this backstage segment, they're talking a little bit about, kind of the championship match and how Hulk Hogan stole a victory from Yokozuna, who was the champion at WrestleMania. After he got done with a grueling match with Bret Hart, he took advantage and got a cheap title shot, and Hogan actually stole the title and won the title at WrestleMania 9 for his 5th title reign in the WWF. So, we then go into the next opening round tournament match, which brings us Hacksaw Jim Duggan, the ever popular Hacksaw. And he is taking on the Beast from the East, Bam Bam Bigelow. Duggan, in this matchup, they start out, Duggan takes down Bigelow, and Savage says that Bigelow has credibility. I basically think credibility. Okay, according to the word right now, that's, the reality of Randy Macho Man Savage on commentary. But we get a slugfest because both guys are pretty much big brawling brutes in their own right. However, we have to move to the bear hug spot that Duggan breaks out by biting him. That's right, Duggan is biting Bam Bam Bigelow to get out of this hole. Duggan goes for the 3-point stance, his classic football charge, and he misses and he glides into the turnbuckle. Bigelow climbs to the top, and he flies off with a big headbutt. 1 and a 2 and a 3, and he advances in the tournament at the 4-minute and 59-second mark. Backstage, we get a quick interview with the Red Rooster, Terry Taylor, and we get him interviewing the Smoking Guns and the Steiner Brothers before their 8-man tag match later tonight. Both teams mention how their finishing moves are unstoppable before Rick Steiner jumps in and barks everyone all over the place. So at this point then, we get into our next and final opening tournament round match, which is the Native Tatanka versus the Narcissist Lex Luger. Lex Luger, at the beginning of this match, is actually forced to put an elbow pad on because of his metal forearm. And the story in the WWE was that metal forearm that he had, that steel plate in his forearm, was used to knock people out. So Bobby Heenan says to make it fair, we should tie Tatanka's shoes together. Bless him. The fight goes outside for officials, and they actually are trying to remove Luger's big giant ring from the mirror that he used, but it just didn't work out. Savage mentions that he would love to be the first King of the Ring winner, but again, remember, he's honestly was a King of the Ring winner, and the WWE didn't want to seem to acknowledge that very much, or the WWF. He does claim that it feels equal to the WWF title during this match. So the King of the Ring and the WWF title are equal according to Savage. Some interesting commentary tonight by him. So, there was a little bit of Savage putting over the tournament, though, in his own mindset. And while Bigelow during this match appears person in person, tells us what he wants, and he states that he wants to fight Tatanka in this match. And the two guys in the ring continue to trade basic wrestling back and forth. And this match was a little bit longer than the other ones. To be honest, neither guy was really kind of getting it going, but they are, definitely doing their best to try to work. I didn't mind the match so far, and I like to see the two styles going at it. Tatanka keeps trying to build momentum, right? And then Luger stops him at every time he just gets something going. He does keep the near falls within side cradles and roll-ups. Heenan has the score because he's got the brain scan going on where he draws on the TV, and he's got the score of 1,038-4 for this match in his brain scan analysis. It just makes me realize how great Bobby Heenan was on the microphone, and truly, he's one of my all-time greats when it comes to color commentary. If you guys have never seen his work, just go back and watch any of them. The guy's hilarious. So at this point, Tatanka begins to, kind of energize up with the crowd. And with 3 minutes left, because the countdown's happening, and remember, there is a time limit, a 15-minute time limit on these matches. 3 minutes left in this one. And he gets a near fall, including one with a top rope chop, which was one of his signature moves. He goes basically to it again, but misses the crossbody. And there's a big clothesline by Luger, and it gets him a 2 count. And this time, the same goes for a power slam. And Luger nails a pretty good-looking suplex with 30 seconds left as the clock is ticking. And it's clear, how this might just end. And after a backbreaker, Luger takes too much time to make the cover. And he actually goes so slow that the time limit expires right at the 15-minute mark. That's right, you guys. So it's a draw. And what that means is in the semifinal of the second round of this tournament, Bam Bam Bigelow will actually get a bye and get to go straight to the finals because of this time draw. Now, the match, did its job. It served its purpose. And these guys will actually end up feuding at later SummerSlams. But I do want to say, even though it added a dramatic effect, I didn't want the WWF to get in the habit of using this in a tournament as a way just to make the tournament shorter. So I think it was okay for this first ever, televised King of the Ring. And I'm all right with the way it kind of shaked out. So at this point, we get another backstage segment. And in this one, Mean Gene Okerlund is interviewing Mr. Perfect face to face with none other than his opponent, Bret the Hitman Hart. And Mean Gene puts Bret kind of on blast, honestly, earlier in the night when he says he'd rather fight Mr. Perfect over Mr. Hughes due to his endurance. So it makes a very awkward moment for Bret, and Bret said, "You must have misunderstood me." And Mr. Perfect got a little mad, saying, "Oh, you think I'm an easy win." And it gets very awkward, and then the two banter about their fathers, and he says, "Well, my old man beat your old man." He's like, "No, we never did," and they just go back and forth. Mr. Perfect, at this point, then also brings up the fact, or Bret brings up the fact that, SummerSlam, they did win, and that match was an easy one for him. But Mr. Perfect then just says, "All right, you know what? Let's settle this in the ring." And he offers his hand to shake Bret's. And at the last second, he goes in heel mode and he pulls it back. And he says, "I got you. Just like I'm going to get you out there right now, Bret." Bret looks very awkward, like he was just kind of picked on by the Perfect protege. And at that point, Mean Gene is kind of looking like a little bit of a stir the pot kind of guy. So we go to our very, next tournament match, and that is a really good one between Mr. Perfect and Bret the Hitman Hart. So we did get a mention that Bret's hand is taped up from Razor stomping on his fingers earlier. And there's a wrestling sequence that opens, and there's hip tosses and takedowns, and each move looks crisp and pointed out by Heenan in the corner. And then we get Perfect unleashing a vicious chop. Mr. Perfect, Bret sends him to the corner and he hits a scoop slam, and Mr. Perfect gets up and nails one of his own before Bret takes over with a headlock. And there's a big offensive exchange back and forth. Jim Ross, says Jim Ross, and he is correct. These guys are just going at it, and they're getting all crazy. That was perfectly executed by both men. Bret gets a crucifix for 2, and back to the headlock. There's a cross body from Brett, and the kick out sends him to the outside, and he comes in with a sunset flip for a 1 and a 2 before going right back to the headlock takeover. Perfect gets out with a knee to the gut, and Savage mentions that how he and Perfect both have a very salty past, and there's a beautiful drop kick. And it's funny because that salty past comment, there was some general animosity between Perfect and Savage years ago, especially on commentary. Basically, he holds up the ropes for Brett to re-enter the ring, but nails a cheap shot on him, and it's super Bret Hart is doing anything to win. There's a beautiful storytelling and psychology in this matchup. He continues this by driving Bret's face in the ring apron, and he draws a bunch of boos. And I tell you what, these guys are just magic in their matchup. From SummerSlam to King of the Ring, anytime these two get in the ring, it's just great stuff. Mr. Perfect hits a well-placed missile drop kick, but Bret gets his foot on the bottom rope just perfectly. And Perfect is frustrated, and he whips Bret for his signature sternum corner bump. Boom! Hit in the chest. And both guys are up top, and now Bret hits a perfect second rope suplex for a 1 and a 2. He kicks to Perfect's leg when he's overselling it like he normally does, just like at SummerSlam. And Bret applies a figure 4. And at first, Jim Ross thought Bret was going for his signature and his infamous sharpshooter, but no, it was actually a figure 4 in the middle of the ring. And he grasps at the ropes, and the damage is done. And basically, like a shark with blood in the water, Bret attacks the leg. And Perfect fights back and locks in the sleeper hold. And he's going down, and Bret's getting groggy. And Bret makes the ropes. Perfect's knee gives out, and he slaps it because he's basically feeling everything out and how it is. There's just a nice, psychology and ring talent here. He goes back to the sleeper, and he uses the ropes for leverage. Bret breaks it by sending Perfect into the turnbuckle. Bret connects on one of the hardest uppercuts you're ever going to see in your life. So basically, at this point then, he hair tosses Perfect, and Perfect gets crotched into the ring post. There's an atomic drop, a side Russian leg sweep. We're going for the Hitman moves of doom, as they say. And then the pace of this match is just really unreal and shifted at all the appropriate times. Stiff backbreaker and a second rope elbow for a 1 and a 2. And at the back elbow that looked vicious, the sharpshooter attempted, but Perfect goes for an injured fingers of Bret that they mentioned and they set up in the story at the beginning of this matchup. If you paid attention, it was so cool in the psychology of it. Yes, that's right, it came into play. And I was hoping for that, and I just loved the storytelling. They kind of did that throughout the night with different stuff. And it gave me definitely an old school pay-per-view vibe in the modern era watching this. He steps on the hand, again, great strategy. He goes for the perfect plex. And remember, the perfect plex was dang near undefeatable at this point, but Bret blocks it, and he suplexes him over to the outside. And that just goes crazy because there's a suplex, and both men are suplexed, holding on to each other as they go over the top rope, and a very good protection of each other, but also never seen that before. And then at that point, we get a count out tease, but Mr. Perfect, I'm thinking, oh no, not another draw. But Mr. Perfect actually pulls Bret Hart by playing possum, and he pulls Bret into a small package for a 1 and a 2. And that's it, because then Bret reverses it on his own, and he gets the 1, the 2, and the 3, and Bret Hart wins at the 18-minute and 58-second mark in the semi-finals matchup, in which they did get a 30-minute time limit. So your winner going to the finals is going to be Bam Bigelow and Bret the Hitman Hart. Hey guys, before we continue with the action, I just want to say thank you so much for what you do for me. Like, share, and subscribe. Appreciate it. It really helps out the channel, even a simple like. And you know what? Follow me over on Twitter. I enjoy talking wrestling with you guys, at @TheBryanAdkins. I want to say thanks to my tag team mates over at fansofprowrestling.com, in the Wrestling Fans Insight podcast. Also, I want to say a special shout out in addition to our other friend, Ted, the Hillbilly Heel, with the Heel Truth podcast. Teddy, I know you're listening, and I appreciate you shouting me out in your shows and always the continued support. And, this whole community we built on Twitter, and it's just growing, and it's just a positive wrestling community. So if you guys are down with that, I got 2 words for you. Click like and go ahead and follow. All right, let's go ahead and get back into the backstage segment where we get a close zoom in on Jimmy Hart. Jimmy Hart managing Hulk Hogan in his crazy airbrushed jackets. So we get a nice picture of that. And as the picture zooms out, we then get a classic Hulk Hogan promo talking about his side of the story at WrestleMania and talking about how he's going to show Hulkamania running wild on Yokozuna coming up right next in the next matchup. And so at that point, we then go to the WWF Championship matchup between the 400 and almost 500-pound Yokozuna at 6 foot 4 inches, going against the power of Hulkamania with Hulk Hogan in the WWF era. And Hogan again in the middle of his 5th WWF title reign. Jim Ross, pay attention to the psychology here. Jim Ross points out how many Japanese cameramen are at ringside. That's going to come into play. Great psychology by JR. That will be, again, huge in the match. They size each other up eagerly, and as this match starts out, they're trying to show who's more powerful. Hogan does a really good job of acting surprised when Yokozuna has the ability to try to basically throw down with him. Yokozuna slams him like it's nothing. JR asks if anyone can slam Yokozuna, planting the seeds that Hogan might just do that tonight, like he did Andre all those years ago. And for an upcoming SummerSlam angle, it actually ends up being Lex Luger, who you guys will learn will be body slamming, challenging Yokozuna in the future. So, Hogan dodges a move and starts to fire off shots. He looks weak compared to, many years ago, but he still has it and he has it going on. He bites Yokozuna because, that's what he wants to do. And then his slam attempt fails as he does a second try on the big man from Asia. Hogan gets some clotheslines, and Yokozuna was really good at playing the stumbling big man without falling down. He definitely had the big man psychology. He might have worked with Mr. Hughes, who knows on that. So it's not a Hogan-style match without a big bear hug, right? And the USA chants, and Hogan's looking helpless. And then Hogan rallies as Bobby Heenan on commentary claims that this should have been on neutral ground. It's unfair that this is in America. And again, it just kind of, states where that should be. He tries a third slam and he fails, but he kicks out and he starts to hawk up. And he's going hawk and he's getting the energy of the crowd at the Nutter Center. And it takes 3 big boots to knock the big man Yokozuna down to the mat. And when have we ever seen 3 boots needed? I want to say maybe, keep me honest here, guys, when he fought Zeus, it might have taken 2. So, a photographer actually at this point gets up on the apron. Remember what we mentioned about that psychology and storytelling? Yes, a photographer jumps up on the apron wanting to actually get a photo of maybe this epic moment. And Hogan goes over to him and the camera just explodes in his face. And Yokozuna then drops the leg drop on Hogan due to the exploding fireball coming out of the camera as the cameraman runs out of the way. And that's right, Yokozuna gets the 1, the 2, and the 3 at the 13-minute and 9-second mark to become the new WWF World Champion once again. So, at this point, Yokozuna then drags Hulk Hogan over and squashes him with the bonsai drop. And then basically, the crowd is looking very bummed. They try to cut some shots of some children crying in the crowd, showing that this could be the end of Hulkamania. And little did we know that that was the case with the WWF. This would be the end of Hulk Hogan and his time with the company until 2002, many years later. And as he would now, we know, go on to WCW and do great things over there and change the industry as a whole for life. But I digress. So let's go ahead. Bobby Heenan makes an interesting comment here. And he says, Bobby the Brain Heenan says, the bright lights of the WWF are too much for Hulk Hogan. He's done in the World Wrestling Federation. We really did not realize the foreshadowing that Bobby the Brain had going on there. So good, fun matchup. I enjoyed, I loved watching Hulk Hogan years ago, and I was definitely a big Yokozuna guy. I felt like this was a good passing of the torch, modern era. It was a little weird with the cameraman, and that's how Hulkamania ended. But who knows? that could have been the ending that Hulk Hogan wanted, knowing what he was going to do with the other company in WCW. So we get another backstage segment, and this is Terry Taylor, the Red Rooster, once again interviewing Mr. Perfect, and he doesn't want to really talk because it was a tough loss. He says Bret Hart's a great wrestler, and they've wrestled many times, and he has a respect for him, and then he basically wanted to leave. And then we cut to Mean Gene Okerlund, who is interviewing Shawn Michaels, the current Intercontinental Champion at the time in the WWF. And he calls out Hulk Hogan, and he calls him a dinosaur before Mean Gene asks about Diesel. And Shawn reveals that his name is actually Diesel for the first time ever. He was just known as his big bodyguard. And this was one of the first times, I believe, that he actually recognized and gave him the name of Diesel. So, we're not done yet tonight. We got a finals matchup, and we got an Intercontinental title matchup. But first, we got an 8-man tag matchup. We got Money Inc. and the Head Shrinkers with Ava versus the Smoking Guns and the Scott Steiner, the Steiner brothers. So this is a quick one and kind of very mixed tag match. They start off with Scott Steiner against Ted DiBiase, the $1 Million Man. They perform some nice moves. There's a Steiner line, and it takes DiBiase over and out of the ring. I still don't basically, why this isn't just a Money Inc. Basically losing their belts to the Steiners. Instead, they kind of did this weird tag match. Bart Gunn and Fatu basically do an exchange, and Fatu shows off, some athleticism, right? So this was pre-Rikishi days for him. And so when he was a member of the Head Shrinkers, it kind of gives you some Jimmy and Jey Uso vibes, the early years, 1.0, I guess. We get a lot of quick tags with IRS, and DiBiase do some stuff before the Head Shrinkers nail Bart with a double backdrop. There's a double axe handle, love those moves, and from IRS, and he gains 2 before Bart does a sunset flip. There's a lot of points in this match. One where good old JR refers to IRS simply as, I want to say it was VK Wall Street, or he referred to him as his actual name also. And so it was interesting to hear that in the original. So Billy gets the hot tag, and he does his stuff, and then completely with 2 fingers, and Gunn stops him at the moment with the Eddie Gilbert hot shot. And then Heenan claims that Billy isn't the first cowboy to, basically get hung. Wow. Eesh. Bobby the Brain, he definitely had a way of words. DiBiase puts Billy in the $1 Million Dream and then just lets it go, really, and kind of lets him out of it. And then he starts to brag, leading him to get pinned with a small package. A lot of little flips and roll-ups and small packages tonight. So small package and the Smoking Guns and the Steiner brothers win at the 6-minute and 45-second mark. And then all the men get in the ring and start fighting, and it kind of pandemonium breaks down. So at this point, we get another backstage segment, guys. So a couple things that happen. We're going to get a breakdown just of what the finals is for the tournament. And then also, in this, I do want to go over this. So here's where we're at. We got Bret advancing and Mr. Perfect advancing in the first round. And then we have Bam Bam Bigelow advancing, but he gets a pass due to the double time limit draw by Tatanka and Luger. And then Bret Hart goes on to beat Mr. Perfect in an amazing match, which gives us Bret Hart versus Bam Bam Bigelow in the finals later tonight. Also, we get a backstage segment with the newly crowned WWF champion Yokozuna, Mr. Fuji. Hey, I love Mr. Fuji. Mr. Fuji actually talks about how he's going to celebrate with Yokozuna, and Mean Gene's asking some kind of off-the-wall questions now, but he's asking about, are you going to go to Asia and celebrate? Mr. Fuji says no, he's going to stay here in America and celebrate. And they really kind of set up the passing of this torch tonight with Yokozuna as the new big bad boss of the WWE. And so that was great for, a legendary champion that he'd go on to be. All right, we're getting over to the Intercontinental Championship match. So this is Shawn Michaels, all right, the Heartbreak Kid, versus Kona Crush. So Crush takes down Shawn early on, causing him to rethink his strategy. They have an exchange where Crush ducks the super kick, connects on the outside with 2 drop kicks, sending the champion out. There's impressive consideration. Crush's size, I forget how big Crush was back in the day. And I actually forgot about his size overall. Macho Man does a really great job putting over Crush. and he basically mentions how him and Crush have had some, battles, or, actually kind of should have some battles, which will come at next year's WrestleMania. He goes on to slam Yokozuna. He thinks that Crush will win here and actually go on to slam Yokozuna, win the WWF title. Randy, I get what he was doing, but, this guy obviously was not going to be the WWF champion. Diesel basically gets a cheap shot just to help Shawn get the advantage. Shawn ferociously smashes the back of Crush's head into the ring. He hits him into the post a lot of times. And then Shawn targets the head of Crush and they begin to rally. And then all of a sudden, guys, we get two Doink the Clowns, continuing the storyline from WrestleMania 9 with Crush. Two Doink the Clowns come marching out. We get a double Doink. And this is actually played by Steve Caron, is the illusionist Doink, also known as Skinner in the WWF. And then we get Matt Osborne, the original Doink, playing himself, of course. And they come out, and so, we get a little distraction there with the double Doinks smoking cigars, mirroring each other. And then the distraction gives the Heartbreak Kid, Shawn Michaels, the advantage to super kick Crush into the back of the head, and he steals with the pin and the win. And so, winner and still Intercontinental Champion at the 11-minute and 14-second mark, Shawn Michaels. All right, we get now to the final match of the night, which is our King of the Ring Tournament Finals, the Beast from the East, Bam Bam Bigelow, versus Bret the Hitman Hart. So, I want to point out that Bret Hart has wrestled for about 36 minutes so far tonight going into this matchup, which is just an impressive feat, and he really is the excellence of execution. So, while Bigelow went for about 5 minutes, and, he had about a good, almost 80-90 minute rest before this matchup. So, Bigelow coming in, the big man very rested, while Bret is still running on who knows what. Hart is limping as he comes out because he has that bad knee from the Mr. Perfect, getting slammed out into the outside. And then basically Bigelow actually press slams Bret from the ring all the way to the floor, and the commentary team really sells it again, and they act as if it's all over, and it's a really good job by them all night. Inside, Bigelow drops headbutts on the lower back of Bret before he takes a massive bump into the corner. Bigelow is normally known for his agile style, but he's working a more methodical type big man match here. He's focusing everything on the lower back, and that was just great. You pick a limb and you work on it as a heel. That's your job. So every Bret rally is shut down quickly as he takes another big corner bump. Bigelow applies a bear hug because, we got to have a lot of bear hugs tonight. And he slams Bret before it turns, a little more further. And then more, at this point, outside, Bret reverses a whip on the Desperation and sends Bigelow into the guardrail. So they're fighting all over the place. Bret is selling the fatigue of the night of his first two matches. And honestly, there was a little more to that than you guys will realize, and we'll talk about that in the final thoughts. So, Bigelow catches him and drives the lower back into the post, followed by a slam on the aisle, where there is no padding, and there's just some really, great psychology again there. Luna Vachon comes out, and she nails Bret with a chair from behind the official's back. He brings Bret in and hits the diving headbutt for the win. But wait, Earl Hebner is out and he discusses it with the referee. So Bigelow won this tournament according to the initial. But the match is announced to continue as Bigelow drives more headbutts into Bret's kidneys. There's a back to the bear hug, which moves to a backbreaker type submission. But Bret is resilient as ever and rakes the eyes to counter into a sleeper hold. But then Bret dives onto Bigelow and fires off some shots. There's an elbow, boom, a Russian leg sweep, bam, and then a second rope bulldog, as you see here, by Bret that led him to actually try the sharpshooter for one of the first times tonight. So, Bigelow is powerful though, and he kicks him off. He runs into the bear hug slam, but somehow kicks out. Bret ends up on Bigelow's shoulders, and he gets a forward victory roll in one of the great iconic King of the Ring moments. And he rolls him up for the win, the 1, 2, the 3, and the pin. And Bret wins and becomes the 7th King of the Ring winner, and the first televised King of the Ring winner in 18 minutes and 11 seconds. And I want to point out that Bret Hart did this all night without the sharpshooter, which was his go-to finishing move. And if you know anything about Bret Hart, Bret likes to do the little things like that in his stories, and that's what makes him one of the all-time greats. If you guys ever read his book, the Bret Hart Autobiography, I highly recommend, but it's a very thick book. It's about 800 pages, and it's definitely, Bret gets a little wordy, but it's a good read. It's not WWF produced or WWE produced, so you definitely are getting the real deal, raw Bret thoughts. So we then go to the coronation ceremony, and Macho Man, wants to run into the ring to basically hug Bret and celebrate with him instantly. They discuss how he won the WWF Intercontinental and the Tag Team titles, only to add now this prestige. And as they're doing this, Jerry the King Lawler interrupts to say he's the only real king in the WWE, and this is a disgrace. Bret then counters and says, you know what, if you're the king, why did you not even enter this tournament like I did? So as Bret is wearing his crown and everything, Jerry, and he starts to call him, you're not the king of the ring, you're not a king, you're the Burger King. And the chant starts chanting, or the crowd starts chanting Burger King along with him. Lawler then lays Bret out in one of the greatest King of the Ring moments that I just love, with the Royal Scepter. And this was a brutal beatdown, which I don't know if a lot of you guys know that Bret actually legitimately got hurt here by Jerry the King Lawler, which would cause their feud to be delayed. But Bret actually, this feud would continue on into the summer with these guys. And little do we know, almost 1 year later, Bret and Lawler will meet at the King of the Ring event in one of the most iconic matches that I can remember going down. So that was the coronation ceremony, and that was the way this pay-per-view ended for the WWE. And they just, kind of went off camera on this angle, and this beatdown kind of happened, and it was brutal. And Bret actually was like half rolling down the stairs from this little pedestal as Lawler was throwing the cape and the scepters, and he was just wrecking the whole set for Bret. So Bret Hart did become the first televised King of the Ring winner, and an amazing matchup. I want to go to some final thoughts for you guys on this King of the Ring event. So first and foremost, I want to say that Bret Hart is the first ever, televised King of the Ring winner, and he did it with great endurance. But I want to give you some fun facts about this event. So the first is that you guys won't know maybe is the fact that Papa Shango actually wrestled a dark match on this event. It was Papa Shango as the champion of the USWA at the time, and he defended against none other than Bret Hart's brother, Owen Hart. So that was a fun little fact. But more facts about this event you may not know. Bret Hart actually wrestled Bob Backlund the night before the King of the Ring for more than an hour and a half, meaning that the Hitman would have to wrestle all of his matches with King of the Ring because he actually not only just exhausted, but he actually did get injured in that Bob Backlund match, rolling his ankle, which he actually would have to wrestle all three of these King of the Ring matches for all that time while having a legitimate ankle injury. So, again, it probably had to start bothering him after a while, but kudos to Bret Hart for being able to have the stamina and being the WWF workhorse and go-to guy to pull that off. That just makes you respect it even more. The fact that he had that match and he wrestled this event injured. So also, remember we talked about Mr. Hughes, right? Well, Harvey Whippleman was the manager of him earlier that night, and we actually would see Harvey a second time that night because Harvey Whippleman was actually the photographer that helped Yokozuna defeat Hulk Hogan, and another fun fact. So it never became story on TV. However, it was just nice to know kind of who was helping out behind the scenes. And then finally, Bret the Hitman Hart becomes the first ever two-time King of the Ring winner on this night. As we mentioned at the opening of my program here, Bret Hart did win the year before King of the Ring and became the sixth winner of the tournament. And this year put a crown on it, so to speak, with an actual televised one, giving him the seventh win, which actually makes him the only two-time King of the Ring winner in the history of the King of the Ring. So, Hart again won that first version, and this basically included like a lot of different wins over a lot of different kind of unknown guys. But, great tournament. Those are my final thoughts. My shout out, obviously goes to Bret Hart for the matches of the night here. He had great matches on all levels. Lots of psychology from the commentary team. And I will say, we also did get, some fun, passing of the torch from Hogan to Yokozuna. So for me, going back and seeing King of the Ring 1993 was a great winner. And, it makes me excited around this time of year because this is when this tournament was held. And I would love to see the WWE take on and bring this back. And I know they were supposed to do that this year, but plans changed with the Night of Champions. But I would say let's not give up on this. Let's have the King of the Ring in June every year. And let's make King of the Ring the actual reason if you win King of the Ring, you get a title shot at SummerSlam automatically. Let's make it what Royal Rumble is to WrestleMania. Let's make King of the Ring that, indeed, for SummerSlam. Well, guys, there's all my final thoughts. Now I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. And I want to say thank you again. As always, remember, like, share, subscribe. Thanks for watching. And that's not goodbye around here. It never is, but it's just what? Game over.